Congressman Doggett, let me just start, because I want to really dig into some of these things that are being peddled out there. Let's talk about the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, which is a separate operation from the White House's budget office. And let's talk about how you score a bill, this concept of static scoring versus dynamic scoring. Because Mike Johnson's favorite thing right now is that this is scored statically. It's not taking into account the animal spirits that this budget is going to unleash, and so we're going to grow our way out of this deficit. Just give me the basic class on this.
I guess basically dynamic scoring is a way of pouring a little magic dust over the facts that are out there. It's part of the Republican claim that tax cuts always pay for themselves. And we have great historical evidence that under Trump's first tax cut, under Bush, under Reagan, they didn't pay for themselves. They drove our deficits, our national debt higher and higher. One can argue that we should use dynamic scoring to score the cost of the benefits of medical research or more public education. But those get into very questionable estimates. And so we're better off relying on the facts as we have in the past. The numbers, the math, as you pointed out, doesn't favor the Republicans. And so they're challenging the scorekeeper. And of course, it's not just the Congressional Budget Office, but Penn Wharton, the business school at the University of Pennsylvania, came up with a higher number, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. And of course, the top number counter, Elon Musk, best buddy, he came up with the same conclusion that this is an abomination.
Right, none of these are liberal organizations doing that. But I think your examples are great. It's like, why don't we dynamically score if everybody had health care or if everybody got the education they were going to get? Charlie, it's not that there aren't things that can be in a budget or happen under administrations that can grow the economy. It's just that it's a little bit of wishful thinking. Sometimes it'll work. You might, and I might be talking in 4 years and say, wow, look at the growth we had over the last 4 years. Or we might not. Sometimes that's got to do with policies and budgets. Sometimes it doesn't.
Well, just a few things. This is the oldest game in town. Everybody complaining about the scorekeepers. We've seen this every time there's a major reconciliation bill. People complain about the score. Nothing new here. Now, in terms of tax cuts paying for themselves, it's true the tax cuts will not pay for themselves, but we have seen over the years, from Kennedy to Reagan to the Bush cuts, even to the first Trump cuts, that revenues do increase pretty significantly. Do they pay for themselves? No, but they do increase. So I think we have to keep that in perspective as we listen to this, and also keep in mind that whatever happens to this, the Senate is going to tear this thing apart. We all know that. The House punted this thing over there, and the Senate never liked the idea of one big, beautiful bill. In fact, they always wanted to break it up, and I wouldn't be shocked if they do, because there are a lot of things in this bill well beyond extending the 2017 tax cuts that are politically problematic for many Republican members.
So, Congressman, this is a good point. There's a reason why this one big, beautiful bill. I think regular people like me, even who understand economics, but I think regular people would rather have discrete bills for things. But that's a problem, right? Because everybody throws whatever they want in the bill for their own purposes. But this bill passed by one vote. The big, beautiful bill passed by one vote in the House. If some senators get their way, Republican senators, and say, go back and do this as 6, 10 bills, whatever this should be, there's a big danger it doesn't pass.
That's exactly right, because it only took the bill passed by one vote after a significant amount of Trump arm twisting and threats to members to primary them. And so bringing it back in a much different form is a real problem for them. And of course, now it would appear that the other big hammer that they used on members, the threat of Elon Musk spending millions of dollars to help them hold their seats, get reelected, that's no longer there. And so I think they're in a difficult position. But they'll be leaning on those Republican senators. Hopefully they will have the courage to significantly change this bill. It's not that I disagree with Elon Musk in the concern about the size of our national debt. I mean, we paid last year more for interest on the debt than we did for national security and our defense budget. My concern is what he wants to do about it. And just as his DOGE effort was truly a failure, he never got a single case of prosecutional fraud that he could present. I think the idea that we should take even more health care away from Americans to pay for tax breaks for billionaires like him. That's the wrong path. But the basic concern that Republicans voice about fiscal responsibility is right. They're just acting in a very fiscally irresponsible way by supporting this big, beautiful bill, which has so many ugly details.
This is a good point. And Charlie, when you look at this bill, it's not mired in conservative principles. I think, and by the way, it doesn't have to be a conservative principle that our debt and deficit should be more in control. I know some people will disagree with me, but the fact is, most people should have a handle on what it is and why the deficit is as big as it is. But this isn't really a Democrat-Republican fight. This is a Republican-Republican fight right now, Charlie.
Yes, it is. And there's a little bit of a conundrum right now for Republicans in Congress. If they fail to pass the extension of the 2017 tax cuts, that means rates will go up on everybody. When you combine that with the tax increases from the tariffs, it's likely that we'll be in a recession. And then, of course, we'll see the deficit go up because when the recession hits, revenues tend to drop. And of course, if you do pass the extension of the 2017 tax cuts, it will add to the deficit. So this is what we're dealing with. Now, there might be a way out of this, frankly. Trump, you remember, and Lloyd Doggett was there. We were there together in 2013 when the Bush tax cuts were expiring. President Obama had just won re-election. And what we did then is we extended all the Bush tax cuts except for those on the highest earners. And the rates went up from whatever the rate, I think went from 36 to 39.6%. And right now the highest rate is 37. You could perhaps cut that same kind of a deal. Now you'd have to get rid of a whole bunch of the spending cuts that Republicans have in there that Democrats subject to. And maybe some Democrats would be inclined to be supportive if you could do that on a bipartisan basis, because that's what we did. We extended those tax cuts, and they could. And I think Democrats probably don't want all the tax increases, the tax rates to go up on everybody. But that would require some level of bipartisanship, which, of course, is hard to do these days in Washington.
Well, you bring up a really good point. Congressman Doggett, there are some tax cuts that are going to benefit middle-income people. There are some, like the SALT deductions, not that interesting to red state Republicans, but to a lot of blue state Republicans, that may be helpful. So I think there's a level of tolerance for tax cuts for some people. There's a feeling that these ones disproportionately benefit the rich, which you might still be okay with, except for the fact that it increases the deficit, which is supposedly the goal you were trying to avoid. So I think Charlie makes a point that if there were a regular process here, a real budgetary process in which there were negotiations, not all on cable TV, there could be an answer.
LEI offered an amendment that's very similar to what Charlie has referred to, and it's similar to what did happen back in 2013 or so, and that was to limit all the provisions of this bill, including many that I don't like, what I call the good, bad, and the ugly of this bill, to those people who earn $400,000. That is about 98% of Americans, and to cut it off for the top 2%. And if you do that, that reduces the cost of this bill about in half. Even Donald Trump hinted, just as we were approaching the consideration of the bill, about some limitation on those at the top. He hinted at it for about an hour before it was totally cut off, since it's kind of contrary to the philosophy of some of my Republican colleagues. But there is a way to reduce the cost of the bill, reduce the number of people who will lose their health coverage, act more fiscally responsibly and more responsibly for the many people who need to have a healthy future. And that's unfortunately a position that's been rejected in the House, but it's certainly something the Senate should be considering.
Charlie, there's a little bit of funny math going on with the effect of the tax cuts on the deficit. There's a little funny math going on as well with the tariffs. You come from Pennsylvania, so this is a state in which tariffs are important to different people for different reasons. But they do affect the agricultural component in Pennsylvania, the steel manufacturing, the weaponry. Talk to me about banking on these tariffs bringing down the deficit, because we don't know whether they will or they won't.
Oh, I think it's fantasy if anybody believes that these tariffs will bring down the deficit, because we'll never collect as much revenue as people think, because people will find ways to avoid paying the tariffs. The companies from other countries selling into the United States will sell less, so you'll get less revenue because of that, or they'll find ways to avoid it altogether. So if anybody thinks we're going to make up a whole lot of money on tariffs, I think they're crazy. It's also, of course, going to cost us in terms of jobs in our state. Take steel tariffs, for example. Okay, steel tariffs are going to go up 50%. Pennsylvania has a great heritage of steelmaking. But I can assure you there will be far more jobs lost in a state like Pennsylvania from those who use steel, whether they're making automotive parts or cars or machines or appliances or whatever. They are going to lose far more jobs among the steel users than the steel makers. That's how this works. We're just going to slow economic growth, and we're going to, in all likelihood, perhaps push ourselves into a recession. And this is completely avoidable. It's, of course, causing all sorts of volatility, not only in the stock market, but more importantly, the bond market.
Yep.
And so I think this is a complete and utter fantasy that people think we're going to some magical elixir that will solve all our problems. It won't. It will make things worse.
And that applies to all governments of all stripes, all right? No matter where you are, don't do fantasy math. Just do actual real math and let's work it out. There's enough out there that can confuse things without actually confusing it in the recipe. Thanks to both of you guys, Democratic Congressman Lloyd Doggett of Texas and Charlie Dent, former Republican congressman.